about the school section. That's, in my mind, an archaic bit of history about the survey system. So, did that answer your question at all?
Yeah, my question was gonna be, do we need to inform buyers of the possibility of the school be
No.
taking the land?
I mean, you would, but it won't work like this anymore. So if somebody's buying property next to, buying a house that backs up to an open field, and it's been in the local paper, and you know that the school district is planning to build a brand new elementary school or middle school there, I think that's something you should tell them so that they know. It's an interesting thing with buyers. Some people love to live backing up to the school soccer field because for a lot of the time, you look out and you've got open green space. And some people hate it because you look out and you have screaming, rambunctious, noisy kids and balls flying into your backyard. It kind of depends upon what time of day you're home, how deep that schoolyard is, how it's used, and how you're disposed to children and normal children activities. So I do think that's something that a buyer's agent should disclose. It's not an obligation for a seller to disclose that, oh, the school district has announced they're going to build here, or the neighboring land is owned by a school district. But it is the kind of thing as a buyer's agent that, you should tell people if you know it. Or,
I just meant for condemnation.
yeah. No, for that, no. Originally, the school section that was sold, the only thing that I know that anybody has ever been asked about that is, what's the school section or whatever. But again, it wasn't where schools went. My understanding of reading, and I have on one of my old computers, I literally have a 760 some odd page PDF file of the history of this system in the United States. It tells you all about the surveyor generals and which ones were good and which ones were drunks and how the system started and all this fascinating reading. However, this is meaningless today. This whole school section thing isn't something we should even bother to address because all of our school systems today are funded totally differently. Great.
I just found out that if you have the square footage, you can just divide it by 9 in order to get the square yardage.
Right, that's what we were talking about here, right, exactly, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly, right, so that would be the idea. But when you threw that cube grid thing, I didn't think about that, but no, that wouldn't work, but this is what you are gonna wanna do. So you figure out how many square feet you have, divide it by 9, and then you're good.
Okay.
Right. Okay, so that's the whole school section. I passed out to everybody a survey. We'll go over that in a few minutes. I kind of wanted to look at that. But I wanted to finish up this rectangular survey system. Because so far we've talked about this as though this is a flat grid on a flat surface. And it's not. It's a flat grid on a spherical surface, right? So it's nice to think of the principal meridian that just runs forever straight north and baselines that run forever east-west, and then you could just kind of lay this thing out and it all works perfectly well, but that's not what happens at all. In fact, if you want a visual on this, imagine going to the store and not in a box, but actually just buying for somebody a basketball or a volleyball or a soccer ball, and you get wrapping paper, which is flat. You lay the ball in the middle of it, you can tightly fold the wrapping paper around the ball, right at the middle of the ball, right? But now, when you start to wrap it up on the ends, what happens? You got all this paper you don't need. It's just a visual mess, right? So you can wrap it up, you put bows around it or whatever. Well, the problem with this is the same thing. If you take this flat grid system and apply it onto a sphere, it eventually gets like that wrapping paper on the basketball. So every so often we have to bring this system in because the sphere is getting narrower as you go north, and, as you're in the northern hemisphere as we are. And so what we do there is we have township sections that are sometimes meant to correct, and so these lines will just move over by a section, and you'll have some townships that are 24 by 24, just for the purpose of kind of correcting the grid as you go up. You also have problems of geography. Braden asked earlier what happens with hills and things. These surveyors were trudging up and down over hills and across creeks and through forests and dealing with hospitals who didn't want them to be there and all kinds of other problems and challenges, and trying to figure out how to make this whole system work, and the surveys weren't always accurate, especially at the beginning. And so what does the next surveying crew do when they come along and they don't even agree that the point is where they should be working from? So you end up with fractional lots, or you end up with little unusable sections or pieces of property that because of a natural body of water, or because of a state line, or some other geographic accident that they have to deal with. So when you look at things like fractional lots, government sections, check sections, all these kinds of things are designed to fix the defects of the system. So maybe that's helpful for you to just kind of remember that. This is one of the reasons why I pointed out earlier, the typical question about a township refers to one that's 36 sections, and you can just assume that that's the case. But that's not the case in reality, because you have a lot of different things. I didn't bring the map of this time, but Kane County is 5 townships tall and 3 townships wide. Right? For where we are right now, we're in Sugar Grove Township. There's Aurora Township to our east and Big Rock Township to our west, and that's the width of Kane County. It's 5 north. We're at the south end of Kane County, right? You get down into Bristol or whatever, and you change over Yorkville, you change over to Kendall. So those 3 townships are at the south end. When you get to the first, what are numbered by the county is the first 3 townships in the county at the north, Kane County is not a perfect rectangle. The very top of Kane County is shifted over by 1 mile to make up for the fact that these lines move, right? Because four townships north of here, the whole thing shifts over to try and fix the grid thing. Not many counties in Illinois are that many townships north where you can see that, but you can see it in Kane County. So just be aware that that is the case, and that works that way. And then you have gerrymandering. I think it's Downers Grove. So I live in DuPage County, and where there are 9 townships, but Downers Grove Township, which is in the southeast corner of the county, has the 36, and it's got like another 18 attached to it. It's got 50 subsections in it. And that's partly to work out the gerrymandering that happened with Cook County so that the votes for Cook could be wherever the people needed them at the time that the counties were set up 100 and some odd years ago. So again, it doesn't all fit into a nice, neat thing, but at least it's approximate and gives you a sense approximately of how the whole system works. Okay? I think I've covered everything I wanted to cover on this. Any remaining or residual questions about the rectangular survey system, also known as the government survey system, also known as the public lands survey system? Again, it's only worth the same amount as meets and bounds or lot and block that we're about to talk about, but it takes more time to explain. So just because I spent more time on it doesn't mean it's more important necessarily. It just has more intricacies. All right, well, again, we'll come back to the survey in a little bit. So let's move on to the third system, which is the lot and block system. Oh, I know. I have one other big point I wanted to make. And just a quick question. If you look at figure 9.2 in your text, it shows that Illinois, the property in Illinois, is all surveyed in relationship to 3 different principal meridians, right? The 2nd, the 3rd, and the 4th. It shows the really light gray area in the kind of a strip in the east to southeast part of the state that is actually surveyed in relationship to the 2nd principal meridian, which bisects Indiana. Why that's the case, I don't know, but it is. So any land in that area talks about how far west it is of the 2nd principal meridian. And again, the surveyor can't choose. The 3rd principal meridian is the majority of the state, about 60%. And the interesting thing is, if you look up at the north end of the 3rd principal meridian, north of the Illinois River, there is no range 1 west, right? Because properties that border on the 3rd principal meridian up around, say, Pecatonica or that kind of thing, are going to be described how far east they are of the 4th principal meridian. That's what that dark gray shaded area is showing you there. So you literally can have property west of Rockford, of which the eastern boundary line is the 3rd principal meridian, but your legal description will say how far east you are of the 4th principal meridian. That's just the oddity of the system. And the 3rd principal meridian only describes property in Illinois. It stops at the Wisconsin state line. Everything in Wisconsin is surveyed in relationship to the 4th principal meridian, or maybe the 5th as well, but mostly I think the 4th. And the baseline for Wisconsin, the Illinois state border. So in the entire state of Wisconsin, there is no township anything south. It's all north. Just, again, the oddity of the system, how it works. So, when you go to a particular place, if you look at our legal description, you might notice that. So just a quick question. Where does, because it was an important kind of thing they had to decide at the beginning, where does the 3rd principal meridian start? How do they decide to place the 3rd principal meridian where it is? What's the major geographic feature?
It looks like it's the southern tip of Illinois.
Well, kind of. It's the confluence of 2 easy to identify things. 2 rivers, the Mississippi and the Ohio, where they go there. So again, if you're a national parks or state parks kind of guy or gal, you can go there and you can see the original plaque. And by the way, it's 250 feet different than it was because the Ohio is shoving the Mississippi south as it comes in from the east. And, you know, so where I was, last time I was there, it was all flooding, so it was hard to get to. But the plaque of exactly where that confluence is right where it is, and now it's a couple hundred feet away from the rivers, from where it was originally, because of the movement of the water. But it stays in the same place. So technically, as that happens, I think Illinois gets longer. Yes, sir.
The baseline in the fourth prime meridian stops at Beardstown, is that because of the river?
Could be. That's what they were dealing with, was natural geographic boundaries. And they had whatever crude maps they had to decide this. And these decisions, I'm assuming, were made by the Surveyor General in Washington, D.C., who may or may not have ever been to Illinois. I think the second Surveyor General was from Indiana, for example, which is why you have the second principal meridian where it is. Many of these decisions were being made at the same time that Congress was deciding where state boundaries should be. And so the representatives from Wisconsin, you know, the people from there wanted the state boundary to be at the southern end of Lake Michigan. They thought that was a natural dividing line. There's a very good chance that Chicago could have been in Wisconsin, but it didn't happen that way. So instead it was chosen to be where it is. But that's why you have the baseline, and that baseline, that baseline for the fourth principal meridian is only in Illinois. For the rest of the fourth principal meridian for Wisconsin, the baseline is all the Illinois line going north. So that's a case where you have one principal meridian, two baselines. Different state, so a different area. I'm pretty sure that's how it works. Yeah. I probably said at the beginning of class that doesn't happen. It doesn't happen in the same state. And again, for whatever else it's worth, the farthest east principal meridian is not the one in Ohio. That's where the system started, but now the system has been, you know, you can find one in Florida, but it came later. Because, you know, because that land came from Spain later than the rest of the land came from the natives or from Louisiana, you know, from the Louisiana territory or whatever. Total of 37 of them. And the distance sometimes between principal meridians is hundreds and hundreds of miles. I think the greatest distance, I think there's some place in the out west where you can go like 150 or 160 townships. You know, is it that far? There's 160 miles. Yeah, I think maybe it's 160 miles, something like that, between principal meridians. No, it's gonna be farther than that, right? So this, yeah, it's gotta be farther than that. Anyway, it's ridiculous distance between the two out west. Oh, and one other thing when I'm thinking about it, you know, when this system was laid out, it was meant to provide a valuable service and provide something more legal, more legally accurate. But a lot of the surveying was done by government contractors who, when they got farther out in the southwest, figured out that nobody knew how big the country was. And so they just made up stuff and mailed it in. Imagine that, corrupt government contractors. So you know, people would go out to Arizona territory or whatever and find out that their land didn't exist. That happened in some cases because the surveyors needed to make up land in order to be able to say they surveyed something when they didn't. And so it had its share of problems. And again, there are places where lines aren't truly vertical or truly horizontal, and you think you've got, you know, so many acres and you have something less. And whatever bad survey was done in 1790, that property owner today is stuck with that same bad survey because that's where the legal description was drawn, and you get those odd things. We don't think we see that much around here.
So you can't get those amended?
No, because you'd be eating into somebody else's property to get it amended. In fact, what ends up happening today is, by law, you tend to have to use the more recent survey. So I was told by a contractor that he had the following problem on a house in Naperville. You know, you have setbacks, as we talked about just a little bit, and we'll look at again, where you have to set a property back by a certain amount to be able to do something. So they had this, I think they had a zero lot line kind of thing, or they had a very small setback. But anyway, so they went in and they built this property and everything looked good, and when they finished it, they did a more accurate, updated GPS survey, and they were off by an inch. So the house was an inch over where it was supposed to be, and the city would not provide a certificate of occupancy until they went through the process to get a zoning variance.
Wow.
The original survey, when they bought the property, said one thing. A year later, when they were done with this massive house, or whatever it was they were doing, the survey proved to be off an inch, and the city said, no, we always have to use the more recent technology, the more recent survey. So they couldn't go back to the old one, so they had to get a zoning variance for that one stupid inch. So anyway, some of the, some stuff today you'll find when you resurvey it isn't exactly accurate. For example, this is my favorite surveying story, then we'll move on to the rest. So not too many years ago, the FAA decided to survey by GPS the location of all US airports. And many of them, the runways on there were off by several feet from where they thought they were, what they did GPS, which if you're a pilot flying on instruments, right, you'd like to know exactly where it is. Think about how difficult this was for surveyors using chains and whatever to figure out where things were at one point in time, where that's all they had. And if you've ever marveled at how did people sail the ocean with nothing but a sextant and whatever else to figure out, you know, by the stars where they were going, think about the fact that the US has airports in Hawaii, in the middle of the ocean, and one in American Samoa, which is the only occupied US territory south of the equator. The airport in American Samoa was off by 1,800 feet. That's more than a third of a mile. Now, if I'm flying in through a typhoon or something in an airplane, I don't want to know where my runway is within a third of a mile on some rock in the middle of the ocean. I want to know where it is precisely. So today, surveying is much, much, much more exact than it ever was in the past. And you can get a new survey, but you can't sort of appeal it because, again, you've got somebody else who owns the property next door who's got to go by the same survey stuff. All right, anything else about this at all before we move on to lot and block? Okay, so lot and block is fairly common, and it's what we do in many cases when we get down to a smaller piece of property or when we subdivide. You know, the idea of a lot and block is you start off with a big block of property and you carve it up into individual lots. And these lots then get parcel numbers, which become the descriptors of those properties. So today, when you look around at a typical subdivision, the parcel number, the tax parcel number, the PIN, is actually reflective of a couple of things. It's reflective of a little bit of the rectangular survey system, and it's reflective of how the property was divided up by the county that taxes it in terms of a block and then a lot. So we can just look at that in the book. It's pretty straightforward, but we'll also see it on the survey in just a minute that we look at together. So if you look at, for example, you know, on page 176 in the 8th edition, figure 9.7, you know, it's showing you that you've got this sort of simple layout here, subdivision plat map, and it's got a bunch of lot numbers. You know, every piece of property there has a different lot number. And there are some lot numbers that are duplicated because you have phase 1 and you have phase 2. That's the idea. You know, you have block 1 and block 2 here. So you'd have to know which is which, and then you can identify them as such. So what ends up happening is you go to this plat that's been, you know, that's been recorded in the public record, and you can refer to that. So let's take a look at the survey that I've given you. Sorry that it's so small. This would normally have been printed on legal paper, but it's hard to do today, so it's shrunk down a little bit. So just take a minute or two and look at this, and I'll give you, in a minute, I'll just start asking you about what you recognize from it. All right, so up at the top, the first kind of typed word, what is that we're looking at there? Where it starts lot 130, etc.
The descriptions?
Yeah, that's the legal description, right? So lot 130 in Raintree Unit 3, that's the lot number, and then the block would sort of be Unit 3 of Raintree. This subdivision, this is a survey of my house, and the particular subdivision, I think, has 160 homes in it. So there's 160 lots within that Unit 3 of that subdivision. And there are other phases. There's phases that have condos and other sorts of things. Then it goes on to say, being a subdivision in, and then what kind of, so it goes from being lot and block, and then all of a sudden it turns into a rectangular survey system description, right? In sections 23 and 26, township 39 north, range 10 east of the third principal meridian. So it's describing the location of these entire townships. So if you look at this, you could go to a map of the country, find the rectangular survey system, you can say, well, find me the third principal meridian, find me, township 39 north, range 10 east of that, and then in that township, locate for me the plat map that I need to be able to see where lot 130 is in Raintree Unit 3. And it helps you by telling you that all of this information for the plat of that subdivision is document such and such recorded in DuPage County. So I can walk into the county recorder's office, I'll look it up online, but it's usually in big books. So you walk in and you go to the county recorder of deeds office and say, I'm looking for document R71-43671. They'll point you to a room, help you find it. You can flip that open to the right document, and you'll be able to look at a plat of the entire 160 home subdivision. And you can see where this fits in in relationship to all the other neighbors. So people will sometimes ask me, well, are there other easements on the neighboring properties? Well, that's where you would go to the plat map and just look, what's the layout of the neighboring properties. Okay, so that's typical. This is a common, typical kind of legal description. We'll see another one similar to it when we look at deeds. It's a combination lot and block and rectangular survey system. That's what you're going to get for most properties here. All right, then what's all this mess in the middle?
Driveway, a house.
Yeah, the survey itself, right? That's the physical survey of the property. And so on those things, you're seeing the improvements, right? This does not show the topography, so you're not seeing, kind of the lay of the land. You don't know where it's high or low or slopes or whatever, but you're getting a sense of kind of where it is physically. Two-dimensional drawing. All right, so the gray stuff is the dark gray shaded area is representing what?
Concrete.
Yeah, the concrete, exactly. So you've got a sidewalk, a thin little sidewalk that runs to the side of the house, a really big driveway, a little rectangular in the middle front porch, and then a patio in back, which, by the way, I don't think has round edges to it. It's kind of annoying to me because it would look better. So that just shows you, those surface improvements. And then hopefully you can see, this L-shaped dwelling in here, that's my house. Do you have a question? Go ahead.
Yeah, so the subdivision crosses over sections 23 and 26. So
Correct.
It's sitting right in the middle.
Right.
Okay.
And this particular lot, we don't really know which one it's at based upon this description, but we would know as soon as we look at the plat map, because that line would be on that map and show where that section difference was. We can tell by my parcel number, I'm in section 23, because I know that by my parcel number, but the pin isn't on here, I don't think. All right, so looking more at the survey, besides being able to find the two-story brick frame residence number 574, which is the address number, what else do you see on here?
An easement in the backyard.
Yeah, 10-foot PUD easement. So what does that mean I can or can't do with that bit of property?
Wait, where?
At the back, this section up here,
Okay.
right, where it says 10, very small print, 10-foot PUD easement.
Oh,
Can't build on
Yeah, I can't really build on it. Because what's there, probably? Just-
Electric.
Yeah, electric is there and it's underground. It's nice for a view. Kind of sucks when you sink a shovel into it and die. By the way, underground electric is usually encased in concrete, so that kind of thing doesn't happen. And red concrete, so that you know when you hit it with a piece of equipment to stop doing that.
Call Julie. I said call Julie.
Yeah. So there's electric. There is also cable,
Phone.
phone. Those are the things that are back there. Water and sewer are out front. Storm sewer, sanitary sewer, water are all in front, and not shown on here because they don't touch the property basically.
Do you know where your gas line comes in at?
Yes, I do.
Is that-
Seen it. Seen it in the
Public
ground.
utility,
Hmm?
public utilities.
Yeah, it's probably what that stands for. So I don't know if you've ever seen cable run, you know, what they do is the cable guy comes out, somebody comes out and they just run cable, you know, down from the pole and then you just lay it across your yard. And then sometime later, a guy comes out with a little, like a hole shooter or a little spade or something, whatever, and cuts the sod and kind of sticks the cable under there. I mean, it's not very deep at all, inches at best. Because when they put cable down for property, sometimes they're in a hurry and they got, you know, just not a lot of people on staff and stuff, so that's you have the greatest chance of cutting your phone line, which is not encased in anything, or cable, which, you know, neither one will kill you unless, you know, you did this right before the Super Bowl or something like that. So it's not the kind of thing you really want to build on, right, because you have that kind of problem. And now I have planting beds that I've put on top of this. So I can dig in here all I want, because knowing I had stuff under the ground, what did I do on this easement? I put about 12 inches of topsoil over top of where I wanted the bed, so I could comfortably dig down 6 to 8 inches every year and not puncture through these buried lines. So the worst case, they come in, there's no trees, not even anything that qualifies as a bush, but like hostas and roses and whatever are all on top of that easement, because I don't mind losing those. Oddly, ComEd came in and did electrical work right as we were buying the house, and they put everything back in its original condition, including they opened the fence between me and the neighbor, and when we called them and said, hey, you didn't put the fence back all the way, they sent somebody right out. Even though probably the fence between us and the neighbor probably can't be there, because we're blocking their easement to be able to get in and out of that back. So there is a fence at the back of the property, right? You see that line at the back? That's not my fence, that's my neighbor's fence on the back. If I went to the city of Glen Ellen and said I wanted to completely fence my yard, where do you think that fence line would go? I think they would make me put it
On the other side,
on this side of the easement, and there would be a 10-foot gap between my fence and the neighbor's fence. So I've never touched the fencing in 12 and a half years on my property, because I know stupid things will happen. In fact, on this side, because of typical building codes, because we talked about the boundary disputes or not boundary disputes, but we talked a little bit about encroachments and about even by prescription, and we're going to talk about adverse possession in a few chapters, but most village codes today do not allow you to put a fence on the property line, because they know that that could create a boundary dispute. So they want you to put it in like 6 inches or 8 inches or a foot. So I already had a fence over here. And then my neighbor put a nicer fence over here, and guess what there is in between them? A stupid ass gap where weeds grow, and I can't friggin' get at it because my damn fence is in the way.
Can you take your fence out?
Yes, I think so. But it's just a nuisance. And if I made it all good again, I wouldn't have this story to tell in class. Which to me these days is actually worth a lot. But it really, literally, the grass grows up and I just can't get at it. But they're more concerned, they don't want to field complaints. So they create these rules about you can't put a fence on the boundary line, which if you both want a fence, doesn't make any sense. So anyhow, I would have to pull my fence and then kind of attach it, or just leave a little gap in it and not worry about it. Neither of us have small pets, or like dogs, I guess it wouldn't matter if they're a cat or whatever. So it doesn't serve a real purpose, but problem is fences is a permitted thing typically, and if I change anything with my fence along here, they might make me take this section out back here that blocks that easement, and I don't want to do that. In fact, when my neighbor put his fence in, his fence is exactly, it's off the back by 10 feet. This looks dumb, but that's what the city wants. All right, so what else are we seeing here? You should be able to see the numbers around the outside. What do those numbers represent?
the widths, the
Yeah,
dimensions.
dimensions. So looking at the back where we were by the easement, that section back there is how wide? 72.
5.96.
Yeah, civil engineering dimensions are in feet and tenths of feet. So none of these are feet and inches. They are feet and tenths of feet, 72.96 feet, which is roughly 72 feet, 11 and a half inches approximately. But that's how civil engineers measure. So surveys are in feet and tenths of feet. Right, so that in the back. So in the front, how wide is it?
82.9.
Right, almost 83 feet. And then it's got a letter in front of that, A equals, what does that mean? Well, look down below it, the hint is there, R equals 1,032 feet. What does that mean? The front of my property is on an arc. The street curves. So the radius of that curve is 1,032 feet, and along an arc, it's 82.98 feet, for whatever that's worth. The two sides aren't the same, right? 132.34 feet at the top, 125.32 feet at the bottom. So it's not even a simple rectangle where you can just multiply this and length times width and get how many square feet. So for whatever it's worth, I'll show you how I would average this, knowing that it's not exactly right, but it's approximate. This is, again, this is just kind of for your benefit. If you get it, great. If not, forget it. Don't worry about this. I would do the following. I would take the back and take 72.96 and the front, 82.98. I'm probably not going to do this, but I would add them together, whatever this is, 0.45, 155.94, and then I would divide that by 2 to give me the average of the two, right? You just kind of say, okay, it's approximately on average this wide, whatever that is. And then, which is going to be what? We can do it real quick. I guess it's 77, yeah, 77.97, thank you, feet. So I would pretend that the width is, that it's a rectangle that's 77.97 feet wide. Then I would do the same thing with the lengths. I would take 132.34 and 125.32, add those together, get 257.66, divide that by 2, and what I'm going to get 123.83. Yeah, okay. So then I would take this, the 123.83 as the length, because that's the, no, it's one, it can't be right. 128? Thank you. You said that and I missed that. So 128.83 times 77.97, and whatever that equals, I would say that's approximately the square footage of the lot.
So can you advertise an approximate square footage, or will that get you into trouble?
You can get square foot information from the property card, which is available online from township assessors, and I think you can rely on that. Unless you look at it and go, that can't be right, like you know it's an error, I would go ahead and rely on it. And I think you could put in an approximate. If the lot is 0.2496 acres and you put it in as over a quarter, I promise not to hate you. It's the lot that is, not anywhere near a quarter of an acre. It's 0.17 acres and it gets put in as over a quarter. Then I promise to hate you. At least hate that action you took, because you've now misled me and every other agent that looked at the MLS. So stuff that's really close, and my lot's fairly close. So I'm sorry, do you have the number?
Yes, it is 10,044.
10,044?
4488.
Okay, so 10,045 approximately, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, square feet to run it like that. All right, so really, really quickly, quarter of an acre. How do you know it's less than? Because really quickly, you could take 43,560 and go, that's almost 11,000, right? It's almost, it's almost 44. So it's got to be like 10,000 and what, 800, 10,000, yeah, 10,900 almost, and I'm not there. So I'm right, but I'm clearly less. So I can look at this, yeah, it's 0.23, is that what it is?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so and that's what I remember. My lot is 0.23 acres. So when I put mine in the MLS, I can put in the dimensions. Somebody says, what are the dimensions? I can go in and I can say, it's 73 by 132 by 83 by 125. That's what it would say in words, which would give people just enough information to come up with this if they wanted to, but in the data field where I select how big it is, I'm going to select 0 to a quarter acre, which they don't know if that means it's 1/10 of an acre or real close, but at least I'm in the right. So that's how I would figure out an odd-shaped piece of property like this. If you have a property that's L-shaped, that's fairly straightforward too. If you have a piece of property that looks like this, you break it up into 2 rectangles and multiply each and add it together, right? If you know how far it is from here to here and how far it is from here to here, you multiply and get this area, and then you add it to this area, and that tells you how many square feet you divide. So if you take over here to finish this up, if you take 10,045 and divide it by the 43,560, that's where you're going to get 0.23. Which tells you it's less than a quarter, because a quarter is 0.25.
You couldn't advertise that as a quarter acre then?
If I have to choose between the 2 data fields, more or less, I have to be factually accurate and choose less. If I were advertising it and just using words, I would not hesitate to say on an approximate quarter acre lot. Then I wouldn't hesitate, because I think that difference is nominal, right? Then you're more accurate than saying something like it's way less than a quarter, which is not way less, it's pretty close. And in my subdivision, this is pretty normal. This is, I mean, they range kind of from this up to 11,000, 12,000 feet top. So they're all kind of within a reasonable range of close. So if anybody knows Raintree, the typical broker's gonna go, yeah, these are all roughly quarter-acre lots, which I think is an accurate statement, because they're plus or minus. But here I'd be careful not to select the field that says it's between a quarter and a half, because that's not, it's less. And that disadvantages me, maybe that's worth a couple $1,000. I don't know, but I'm not gonna intentionally select something I know isn't quite right.
When you have those L-shaped lots, is there a type of description you use to tell them it's an L-shaped lot?
Yeah, in the MLS, you would just say it's irregular.
Okay.
And that may even be a data field where you can select irregular. I might even say mine's irregular, because it's not easily calculable because of the arc and the fact that, you know, it doesn't fit into any, not trapezoid, doesn't fit into any regular shape. So it really is irregular. I'm not sure I would bother to flag it. It's not irregular enough to be weird or odd or strange. It's not gonna cause somebody to change the way they garden, for example, so I, worry about it. All right, what else do we see here? You should notice down toward the front, besides looking at all those dimensions, the two corners, in the front, this area here, what is it?
Pipes.
Yeah, iron pipe. Somewhere under the ground, some past surveyor, probably the original one who did the subdivision layout in the early 70s, put iron pipes at every corner. And a new surveyor comes along, they should be able to locate those.
So would those be considered benchmarks?
Effectively. Yeah, well, they're monuments in effect, you know. Benchmark, I think, would probably more likely be for elevation today, or
Okay.
specific location, but maybe not.
Well, in the reading, they
Yeah,
said
that could be right too.
dam for elevation.
Yeah, so I was just thinking, a benchmark is usually something that you absolutely know is dead on. I mean, you can rely on that. These
Okay.
pipes are for location, not for elevation, and I think they confirm what you know, but they might have moved.
So that's the big difference between
I-
a monument and a benchmark?
I think so. That would be my opinion.
Accuracy.
And I'm not a surveyor, so that's my, my layperson view of how that works.
Okay.
Anyway, from construction, I always think of benchmark, I always think of a place you would go, it's a fire hydrant, it's a cornerstone of a high rise, it's a brass plaque and a curb or a sidewalk somewhere, that anybody who's surveying in that area goes back to that spot and surveys from that point, because you don't wanna go to the harbor in New York City and survey from there and drag a tape 1,200 miles to get to where you are, right? So it's what you do when you survey. You start from some place, and then every survey after that comes from a benchmark closer to where you're working.
Gotcha.
All right, so then in the back, if you look at the back, there's two corners back there, right? So there should be something, but if you look at those two corners, what do you notice?
There's only one pipe.
Yeah, there's a spike, they call it, of some kind, what that means exactly. In the other corner, I don't know, they didn't find anything, I guess.
You got a fence.
Yeah, well, that's possible, that when somebody drove the post or whatever. And what else do you notice about the fence line in the back?
It's dang.
Yeah, right, it doesn't match the property line, so there's a bit of an encroachment problem there. It's so nominal that nobody cares. But probably technically today, if both me and my neighbor wanted to, we could force the property line to be where the fence line is, not where the property line keeps getting surveyed. Because legally, by possession, that's probably where it really is, but it's so nominal, nobody cares.
Would that go along with, the 20-year rule, if
Yeah.
you've been using that?
Exactly.
Okay.
I've been in the house for 12 and a half years, and this is where it is. And my chain link fence is, on the side is old enough, and I'm assuming that fence in back may well have been there. I don't know, maybe it hasn't been there that long. But again, if I had a problem with it, I would have dealt with it, but I got easement back there I can't use anyway, so I don't really care. Like, it was George and I were talking about, a situation where if your neighbor's fence is a couple of feet over onto your property and you're gonna lose usable property, you wanna take care of that and regain control of that. But yeah, so exactly, and it's more of an adverse possession case, which we'll talk about in chapter 12, not a prescriptive easement case, because this is a situation where we're using each other's property, not just across, but we're mowing it, planting it, all that kind of thing. In front, there's a 30-foot building line. What is that? Yeah, that's a setback. What I don't know is if it's municipal or private. I'm assuming it's municipal, but I don't really know. So where it's got a 30-foot building line here, you see that real small print, and then that kind of dashed line of sorts, that's saying that my house has to be built behind that, and it is. So if my house were not built where it was supposed to, if it was built too far forward, that would show up on this survey, but it shows, okay, the improvements are back where they're supposed to be. You can get side yard setbacks, rear yard setbacks. Here, all I have is a front yard setback. And again, I think it's a Glen Ellen setback, not a private subdivision. But you can have both, which we'll talk about later. What do you do when you have both? Because today, you usually have both. And I think that's probably about, yeah, anybody else see anything else?
Yeah, I see where your gutters go and your chimney chase.
That's true, no, that's true. You can see my fireplace, the one that juts out on the kind of the, what would that be, sort of the southwest part, it comes out 1.7 feet, that's where my fireplace is.
What's that little thing that comes out on the top part there that's like 2 feet?
Oh, that's the chimney for the furnace,
Okay.
that I don't use anymore. Because I have a high efficiency furnace that they vent out the side of the house with a 6-inch PVC exhaust, which still is wild to me, but furnaces today are so efficient that you don't need sheet metal exhaust because it won't melt the plastic. And you don't have to bend it 30 feet in the air, you can bend it straight out the side of the house.
Are there any building restrictions for the size of the lot?
In my case, I think no, and see how they have a 30-foot building line, they would show a side yard setback if there was. But the answer can be yes, and in modern subdivisions, I think you probably have both. It's not at all uncommon to get 8, 10, 12, 14 foot setbacks, and many of those are the requirement of the subdivision, so they'll be in the CC&Rs, the conditions, covenants, and restrictions, rather than in the municipal code. Again, later on in the course, we'll talk a little bit about, when we do chapter 20, we'll talk a little bit about those differences and how you handle that when you've got multiple regulations giving you different setbacks. Because that's common today.
I got a question
Yes.
for you. I know I think it might even be in Glen Ellen, from a water standpoint, you can't force water to your neighbor's yards.
Yeah, that's true. That's that common enemy water law thing I was talking about at the end of chapter 7.
Right, I've had to deal with that for a lot of years. Is that something that I need to be concerned with as a broker?
No, I don't think so. But if you were going to be a developer or an investor or for your
Right.
own property, then the answer
That's
is
a different
yes.
story,
Yeah.
right?
The whole common enemy thing, in terms of you can't just sort of divert your water problem onto your neighbor and make it their problem, is common courtesy. It's golden rule kind of thing, right? I mean, you wouldn't want it done to you, so you don't do it. But you know, it's also entrenched in the common law, so it's the kind of thing you can't really get away from. But not property owners or developers or civil engineers' problem.
So if I were to come and put a for sale sign on you, I wouldn't have to, or in your house, I wouldn't have to worry about that or be responsible?
No, it's not your job to come out and kind of figure out how the water runs. That would be the case of an inspector. Now, if you noticed, if you're representing a buyer, and you know the buyer wonders about it, I don't think it's a problem to point out to them, look, I don't know, I'm not an expert, but it looks to me like this place is the kind of place that might take water because of its elevation relationship to the neighboring properties, or the gutters don't have any downspouts that run away from the house, all the water drains along the foundation. But you point that out to them and you say, maybe you want to have that inspected, right? That's as far as you take that, because we're not inspectors. You'll have one of the same kinds of challenges that I do, and maybe that Steve does, that anybody who has expertise when it comes to building, be careful about throwing that onto your license, because if you're wrong, because you didn't really do a full inspection, and you're just kind of like I am, kind of glib to talk about construction stuff, and they rely on that, they will sue you, and they can take your whole commission, and it can impact your real estate license, even though in your mind you were talking as a builder, right, as a remodeler, right? The average consumer doesn't know that, so you have to be careful about that. The average person who doesn't have that expertise doesn't have that problem, but for those of us who do, or who act like we do, we take on some extra risk if we're not careful. Or if you do it, just do it consciously, know that you're taking that on every time you share that. All right, any questions, other questions about this survey at all? All right, so that's a typical residential survey and what it will look like. It's good for 6 months typically, by the way, for financing purposes. After 6 months, they have to be updated. All right, let's just kind of see what we can do to finish up thing. Oh, another thing I was going to talk about is parcel number. Doesn't really address this, but this sort of ties into the lot and block system. So the parcel number or taxpayer ID number or PIN, which is assigned by the county in which the property is located, is made up of numbers that work roughly like this. The first two numbers, the first number are 2 digits. They're assigned by the county, and they are based on the number that the county assigns to the particular township. So if you own property in Aurora Township, I absolutely guarantee you the first two numbers on your parcel is 1-5. If you own property in Sugar Grove Township, the first two numbers on your parcel are 1-4. Big Rock Township, 1-3. Because those are the numbers assigned to those townships by Kane County. It's the same township as we see in this system, but the number doesn't come from the grid, it comes from the county. The next two numbers are the actual section number in that township based on the grid. So as I mentioned, my parcel starts off 0523. Milton Township, where I am, is township number 5 in DuPage County, and the section that I'm in is section 23 of that particular township.
So if that was your township right there, you would be number 23 on that spot?
Yeah, exactly, exactly. In fact, if you look at, right, what did it say, sections 23 and 26?
Right.
So that subdivision, that doesn't cross this way, it doesn't cross this way, it doesn't cross this way, it crosses over here somewhere. And I'm in this section, at the southern end of it,
If then that subdivision or lot fell on the 26 side, that number would be 26.
Yep, exactly. Would be 05-26. Yep. Then the next number here is 3, and this is the block. So if you have a huge farm, you'll have this, and then you'll have this, and then you'll have number here, and the last 3 digits will be all zeros, because you don't have any lot numbers. You have kind of this big virgin, undivided sort of territory. But if you divide that up, the last 3 digits here will be the lot number, lot, and block, basically. It should be block and lot, but that's how it would work.
So on yours, would it be 003 for the last numbers?
No, I don't remember what my pin is, and I'll show you that actually next time we get together, because I'm going to hand you my tax bill and hope that you'll pay it.
I'll trade, I won't trade you, because mine's less.
Well, apples are expensive, so, I eat organic, so you don't want to buy me an apple, so I figured the tax bill, whatever. But we can actually look at that if I remember, because I don't remember otherwise what it is. But originally, that subdivision that I'm in, those lot numbers were all added. Whenever that plat map went to the county for approval, they then assigned actual lot numbers to those, and those lot numbers then show up here. But I don't know what my actual lot number is. And my last 3 numbers could be 130. I don't know.
I believe it is.
It could be. I don't know. So, if you get into a place like Chicago, you can have one more. And that could be up to 4 numbers, I think. Because if you're in some high-rise condo building on some postage stamp lot, you've got to have the unit numbers tied in out here. So you won't see this in the suburbs, but it can exist in a pin. So in Cook County, it's very common to have a 5th, and it goes up to 4 digits, because these typically represent the unit number within the condo or co-op building or whatever. So that each individual parcel can be separated out for tax basis. So we do kind of use this system for more than just legal description. The other thing that it can sometimes be used for, it can help to identify rural addresses for like fire departments and things. So if you look at the way some of these properties are laid out in terms of, 34W this or whatever, that's telling you how many sections of property you are west of State Street in Chicago. So if you've got a rural address that's, 2 north something, then you're 2 sections, or you're in the second section north of an east-west line that comes west along Madison Street in Chicago. 00 out in Chicago is State and Madison, and that serves as kind of a point of reference for the rural addresses, so you have a way to have addresses. So again, it doesn't really relate to that system, but the post office piggybacked on the system to create rural addresses when you don't have regular, lot and block and streets and towns and whatever.
Okay, so just very quick. The
Yeah.
first bracket would be the township number, correct?
Yeah, and let me clarify, you will not get tested on this,
Okay.
but it could be helpful just in general. I find it interesting. So yeah, the first 2 number is the township number assigned by the county. So it's not part of the rectangular survey system, it's just a way to use that. And then the next 2 numbers, the actual section, straight from the, oh, I'm sorry, and I'm told that the block that the first number in the block is which quarter section it's in. So the block should always start with 1, 2, 3, or 4, I believe. Okay, we can look at that on a couple of parcel numbers that I'll bring in on Tuesday if I remember to bring those tax bills. This has all been explained to me by an appraiser or somebody in the past that I actually listened to for some reason. So that, you know, that's what I know about it. But it's kind of interesting because there's a rhyme or a reason to it. And you know, if you do property development, then all this stuff would make sense. So, township number assigned by the county, section number that comes straight out of the, you know, usually owned by the county, but it comes straight out of the grid. The block number that the county has assigned, and then the lot number that gets assigned as part of the subdivision process. And I'm not gonna take that down, I'll leave that stuff up here, so if anybody wants to do, again, before the night's over, what Braden did earlier, and come up here and take a snapshot of any of this, help yourself.
I got a question about that state Madison.
Yeah.
Does that stretch all the way to the Iowa border?
I don't know, but I think so. I don't really know. I know it's the case around here. The easy place to find that grid, if you find a regular sort of map that shows everything in 1 mile sections, you'll see that those things are all numbered that way. So you've got the first, second, third, fourth. Again, it doesn't match this numbering, but it gives you a sense of how many miles west you are. So if you know that like we here at Wabansie, we're 4 south something. So that tells me that we are 4 miles and something south of Madison Street in Chicago. If you took Madison and went directly west, we're 4 sections south of that line, plus whatever additional distance. At least the main address of the college, 4th south, 700 and something. So any rural address that you identify out here gives you a sense of how far north or south you are of Madison, or how far west you are of State. I don't know that that means anything. It just kind of shows you how all of this kind of ties into something to give meaning to where things are located and how we identify them. Okay, so that's the basic idea of lot and block. It's basically for subdivisions, and it ties in nicely with the rectangular survey system. Rectangular tells you what part of the world it's in, and then lot and block describes exactly that plat as it was submitted by the developer and approved by the county, maybe stamped by the municipal or county building department or whatever. It becomes a permanent part of the record, and it's always there that you can go and look at. And the survey, you know, again, you could look at my survey and that plat map, and you'd be able to see exactly how it all ties in and fits together. So if you're ever going to kind of sell new construction or look at lots that way, that's how it would work. Bless you. All right. Lastly, just talking about sort of surveying in general. When the survey is done, a crew will come out. Usually, just a two-person survey. Technically, it could be done by one in today's world, but two-person crew will probably come out. I think that survey from today would probably be about $350 maybe, something like that. I mentioned they're good for 6 months for finances. You have to update them. Updates are usually done for like $30 or $50 less. So you need to have it updated. I haven't refinanced for 7, 8 years. So my last survey was done 7 or 8 years ago. This is the one from when I originally purchased the house or closed on my first loan. I guess I had purchased it before under a land contract, but when I refinanced and took that out of the land contract in 2003, the survey is from then. I probably got an updated one later, but I don't have it. Nothing's changed really. So the surveyor comes out, they locate everything, they put everything in electronic documents, and this is usually done just a few days before the real estate closing or before the refinance, because they don't want to spend that money unless you're absolutely going to go forward. And we'll look at that timetable again at the very end of the course. So they work from some local area benchmark from some elevation datum, or datum is the elevation part. Keeping in mind, since we talked about condos last time, that condo surveys are 3-dimensional. This is a 2-dimensional survey, right? They don't talk here all about elevation. But condo surveys have to, because they're basically an air lot. You've got a 3-dimensional cube or some kind of shape, and so it needs to have a kind of a bottom elevation and a top elevation. You need to know where your unit begins, because some condo units, the space under your floor is yours, and in some condo units, the space under the floor is your neighbor's below, or belongs to the association. Why does that matter?
Utilities?
It isn't just that. What can happen? Pipes break, right? A leak. And then let's just say that there's a pipe that breaks under your floor, or within the concrete floor if it's a reinforced concrete condo building, and the pipe breaks and it leaks through and damages expensive artwork in the neighbor's house or neighbor's condo unit below. whose pipe is that? If that's yours, then that's a claim against your insurance or a lawsuit against you or whatever. Now that may seem, cruelly unfair, but that's what you've got. So when somebody's buying a condo, they're not just buying the condo unit right to the walls and to the floor and to the ceiling. They're probably buying some kind of interstitial space that's between the two units of whatever type, depending upon the original condo deck in that original survey. And that's part of what that three-dimensional survey determines. And there have been plenty of disputes over that kind of thing. So again, if you do a lot of condo stuff, you should become familiar with that, and you would kind of explain that to people just so that they know if it's their first condo, and say, by the way, you may own more than just what you see here. You may own 6 inches below or 4 inches above or to the center of the wall or whatever, and that's how that works. Sometimes the association owns the space between, but mostly not anymore. Mostly in the newer developments, that is all owned by one unit owner or another, so the association doesn't get burdened with these random, repairs or whatever. If you got a leak, got a problem, it might be yours to fix, not the association's. And if you wait too long to deal with it and it causes damage, you might be liable for that beyond just insurance losses. All right, so I think that's pretty much all of that. Any questions at all about anything that we talked about in Chapter 9, legal descriptions, surveying, any of this kind of stuff? One other thing I wanted to just talk about briefly when it comes to lots and values and things, we didn't really talk about it. Again, it exists in the 7th. Oh yeah, in fact, you have a 7th edition book, right? You have 7th edition, right? Okay, can I borrow your book? Give me another 10 minutes here, because I want to talk, this is important about lot value and about location and things, but I'm pretty sure, I keep looking through this, I'm pretty sure the diagram is no longer in here, but it's an exercise I'd like to run us through. What I'm going to put up here on the screen is a diagram of a subdivision. See if we can see it well enough. We can't put on a twist, but I'd like to. All right. So let me flip that light, and that's about as close as we're going to get. See what we can see. We might turn off 2 rows of lights. So this is what's called an infill development because there are just 8 lots. So there's only 8 lots here. I'll hold that thing flat so you can see it a little bit better. Hopefully you can see it well enough. I'm trying to zoom in on it just a little bit better. And what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to pretend, first of all, I want you to see what you can identify here in terms of finding the lots. But I'd also like you to think about it and say, what if all 8 of these lots that are here cost the same amount of money? That's probably going to zoom out just a little bit. Which of these 8 lots would you buy or would you recommend to your client to buy if they were all identical in cost?
5 or 4.
Well, hang on. I want everybody to have a chance to look through this and think about it and try and decide, because there's no right or wrong answer to this. So this is a typical plat map, but a very small subdivision. Fertile acres, they call it, whatever. So this 8-unit development is the kind of thing you would do, an infill development, when a developer goes along and there's just a few acres that nobody's ever built on. You buy that, and then you try and figure out how to put some custom houses on it or whatever to make it make sense. So just take a few minutes to look at this, and then think about the criteria that goes into what makes one lot superior to another or inferior to another. Think of this like a buyer or like a buyer's agent, and then we're going to go around the room, and every one of you has to give an answer. So you have to state which lot you want to choose and why, and then we'll move on to the next person. So I'm going to give you a minute to do this. Drag this down just a little. Okay, that's a little better. And if there's anything you're not quite sure about, just ask me about it and we'll look at it. Tom, are you ready? You need another minute yet?
I guess a minute.
Okay. Whenever you're ready, go, because I know that Ken's ready, so whenever you're ready, we'll start and we'll just go around the room. Well, you gotta pick one or the other.
One or the other?
So just pick one of them and then tell us why.
Probably 6,
Okay, and why?
because it's 73 in the bottom,
Okay,
and then, the width is 150.
the depth of it. So yeah, it's 100.53, so it's really 100.5 feet. So you're looking at that compared to some of the other ones saying it's a little bit wider,
Yes.
okay, and at least as deep, at least as the other regular ones. What else is it sitting on in the front? What's happening there in the front of that? Yeah, the cul-de-sac, right? Cul-de-sac is there. All right, good enough. Ken, go next.
I was thinking number 2, because I don't see a whole lot of easements, so you're not gonna have to worry
Okay.
about too many people messing around your property. And then also, I'm thinking if you have kids, it might be a little bit better because you don't have to worry about the kids or cars turning around in the cul-de-sac.
Okay, good reasons. All right, Tom?
I'm still going 5. I kind of like being in the back, you know, back of the subdivision or whatever. You know, you're kind of by yourself. You don't have neighbors on both sides of you.
Okay. Maria?
I like 5 too.
Okay, same reasons or any different reason?
For the same reasons.
Okay. Cecilia?
Same here, I like it because of the, you're like all the way in the back and like he said, nobody's like around you and more private in the back,
Okay,
especially when we have kids.
all right. Ozzy, got a favorite?
I'm gonna go with number 2 for, same reasons that he said.
Okay,
It's just, it's not right on the street.
okay,
It's like 1 and 8.
okay.
Yeah, like, all the other ones have a bunch of easements.
Yeah, well, right, I mean, everybody sees that, right? The dotted lines that are running on 8, 7, 6, 5, up the side of 5, up the side of 4, that dotted line, those are easements,
Yeah.
right? The 12-foot easement for public utilities. And then, I don't know what it is, but look at the little 1-foot wide easement for public utilities between 3 and 4. I don't know what you put in something 1 foot wide. Cable, phone, that wouldn't be room for anything else there, but that's also there. So, I mean, yeah, that's a valid point. Okay, who's next, Steve?
Go with number 3, get a little more parking in the front of the house and the back of the house at the summertime, your patio's in the shade.
Okay, so you're thinking about sort of geographic orientation, something that hasn't been raised yet. Okay? Christina, we can see who's back there. Yep.
I would go with number 4.
Okay.
Just because of the cul-de-sac and you have a little bit more privacy than, being further in
Okay.
versus at the beginning of the street.
Okay. What's different between 4 and 5?
Number 4's got a drainage easement
Yeah.
that concerns me.
Well, it does, right, but it's kind of between, I think, 4 and 5. And then it doesn't have the easement across the back that 5 does.
So I guess
Who's
more
next?
cul-de-sac a little bit though. They got 63.65.
Yeah, right.
62.02.
Maybe if you want to put a 3-car instead of a 2-car garage or whatever, you might be able to do it on one, not on the other. I don't know how marginal that is. Braden, what do you got?
I'll go with 2. just
Okay.
'cause it looks the least complicated.
All right. No, that's fine, right? I mean, that's perfectly fine. Jeff?
I'll be within 1 or 2.
Okay, so you're okay with 1?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, I guess go with Georgie next.
Okay, well, I think I would take either 7 or 2. I'm trying to figure out which way the sun sets, because that
Well,
depends on which way your house would be facing.
Yeah, I'm kind of assuming that, don't they tell us here the top is north?
All right, top is north.
The top is
The
east?
top is
Yeah,
east.
that's what it said.
West?
East 283.
Well, let me see, east, oh yeah, okay, could be, right, all right.
All right,
I see, and that's what Steve was talking about when he was talking about that, right, okay, right.
So so the sun is rising in the front and setting in the back. I had that once, I would choose 7, because it
Okay.
gets really hot in the afternoon sometimes.
So same kind of geographic thinking as Steve, but the opposite sort of answer. You want to be on the other side of the street,
Yeah, I'd rather be 7.
okay? And what other kind of geographic orientation is there besides time of day? There's also time of year, right? I mean, south, north, whatever, in terms of when the sunlight and when you got winter weather, that matters here. All right, we'll go with first Mrs. and then Mr. Moore.
I think I like 1. I like the corners. And
So what do you like about a corner lot?
Quick access to
Okay, so just quick in and out.
the,
Yeah,
I don't have
okay.
to deal with all the kids at the end of the cul-de-sac.
Yeah. No, see, do y'all see what's happening here? That everybody's got a different reason, kind of for why they prefer. Some of us are the same, some of us are completely different. And this is what happens when you talk to your clients. You may love the cul-de-sac, but what if your client is like, Monica, I want easy in and out. I don't want the cul-de-sac. Right? I mean, you got to ask. You have to interview them. Tim?
I would go with one as well,
Okay.
just because it's a corner lot, a little more desirable, and gives the illusion of a bigger yard, even though that section to the north may not be your yard. So
Okay.
it looks like it, and the whole east and west with the sun, bedrooms tend to be in the back, and you can get better lighting that way.
Okay. Fair enough. All right. Kate?
I like number 2, ease of parking in the street for my guests. I'd like to see a sunset. I'd like clean lawns.
Okay. What else is going on up at, I guess what we're saying at the top is the east? What else is going on potentially in the backyards of the properties to the east?
So,
Well, I don't know what that is up there. I mean, but there is one thing that's clearly labeled that nobody has addressed yet.
The well site?
Yeah. I don't know what that is. Little hole in the ground with a little metal wellhead that sticks up, or a 80-foot water tower. I have no idea. Right? But I mean, you'd want to drive that or look at it or see what that is or whatever, because, I mean, you have the easements that you, on the south, or excuse me, on the west side, and lots at the bottom. You have those easements that don't exist up on that end, but you don't have well side. I don't know what you're looking at, right? So that would be something else you'd probably end up wanting to see.
Here's a question that, she kind of brought up. On the south side of this plat here, would that possibly be a sidewalk that's running along 4 and 5 there?
All the way to the right, you mean?
Yeah.
Well, that's still a 12-foot easement there for public utilities. So I mean, I think that's what they're showing.
So really whatever it is, you can't use it, doesn't matter, pretty much.
Don't think so. I mean, you know, if somebody built a sidewalk there initially, you'd have your utilities would be running underneath it. I just think it's a grass easement. You know, it's just dirt that, yeah, you can't build on.
Well, it's not something that I was more questioning on whether you could build on it or not.
Yeah.
But if that's a sidewalk, that's gonna kill the whole privacy thing of 4 and 5.
Oh, yeah, no, I don't think there's any sidewalk back there at all. But this doesn't show us any sidewalks. This doesn't show us any sidewalks whatsoever. Yeah,
Of course not.
yeah. All right, who's next? Sarah, I think?
I picked the second lot, just because I wouldn't wanna be all the way back in the corner, but yeah, like, I wouldn't wanna be on the corner of the streets,
Okay,
because I feel like it'd be too busy.
fair enough. Olga?
Lot 2, because you have like more usable land. There's no easements.
Right,
It's all
okay.
yours. It's bigger than some of the other ones.
All right, Andy?
I'm trying to determine either like 2 or 7, just because of if they said that you're.
Okay. The other thing, you know, the orientation of the sun, you know, getting the warmer sun, you know, the southern exposure, that's a big deal to some people. But that can work the other way too. It kind of depends, because some of you have said the same thing for bedrooms. You want east facing, you want west facing. I mean, it kind of depends upon when you want the sun to come into your space, which side of the house you think that's part of the house you think it's going to be, how it would lay out. A lot of people will say, oh yeah, I want my family room or the back of my house or the, you know, wherever I have the big windows, I want that to face south. Screw that, I want my driveway to face south. I want the snow to melt. You know, really, I don't, you know, it's absolutely true. Right now, I have pockets in my house that are blocked from the sun, and I will be chipping ice in May because it just will still be there. Everybody else is, you know, out water skiing, and I've got ice pockets and snow piles still in certain places. It's just annoying. So I mean, so kind of, again, it depends upon what individual people want. And that's really part of this lesson. It isn't just, oh, look, I can read this thing, which is kind of cool, right? If you can read a plot plan like this, you can kind of get a sense of what something looks like, walk your client through it if they're looking at something like this at a builder's office, or give you an idea that, oh, maybe I'll learn how to do this better, but it's something you can do in an hour. It doesn't take long. You can get comfortable with this kind of thing. But it's a good exercise in what people are looking for and how there are so many different opinions and not necessarily right or wrong answers, and that you really need to be careful to interview your buyers because they'll have different opinions. The other thing is here that, you know, the reality is in a subdivision, these lots are probably priced a little bit differently. Maybe the cul-de-sac lots are a little bit more expensive. Maybe if something's got a really much better view, it's going to be a little pricier. Bless you. And another thing to keep in mind when somebody's buying property is that premium lots, premium location, appreciate faster, almost without regard for what the premium is, than the plain or standard run-of-the-mill lots. So if somebody really is into appreciation, even if it's 50 grand more, buy the damn golf course lot. Buy the lot that backs up to the park district, to the open field. Maybe that's too much of a premium, I don't know. But the rate at which property that has the unique view will appreciate is much faster than the other properties in the same subdivision that just back up to somebody else's house. Builders didn't catch on to this for a long time. You would go into a subdivision and the lot premiums were small, 5 grand, 10 grand. And then they eventually began to realize that the premium lots could have a much bigger premium put on them. And so you tend to see much bigger price premiums today. But those premium lots tend to be the ones that sell first and tend to be the ones that, because of that demand, appreciate faster later. Remember what I said earlier in the course? It's not about buy low, sell high. It's about buying high and selling higher. So it's that demand factor that you want to consider. So for whatever all that's worth. Thank you, Olga, for letting us borrow your book. Any other questions or comments about this? All right, so back to the PowerPoint slides for Chapter 10 on Tuesday. That's up there. You can use those for notes if you like. That is what we'll cover on Tuesday's Chapter 10, which will shift us over into property taxes and liens. And I'll bring in a couple of tax bills for you to look at and for us to compare notes on that as well. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to hang out and talk to you. Otherwise, have a great weekend and try and stay warm.